Here we go again. Fathers and Crafters Market. Some lower prices today. Some more visible price tags. I ended up making 7 hats for the market, 3 different sizes. That's all I can do in the time I have. My new pot holders. And jar openers. And straw couches. It's supposed to get to 35 today, so we might be wanting to jump in the lake afterwards. Hello lovely people, it's Nicola back in the Stitches and Slapdashery sewing room. At least it's a relatively cool spot because the temperatures are in the high 30s this week and it's pretty darned uncomfortable outside. I'm testing out my new mug with some green tea, which is still pretty hot, so we'll put that aside for a minute. After I spoke to you last time, I had made that bucket hat from Sweet Red Poppy, and I was really happy with it. I thought I hated making bucket hats, but apparently I don't hate making bucket hats. I think the difference is this time I'm using denim on the outside, which plays a bit nicer when you're trying to do the circle and the cylinder together. And it's only when I get to the lining that I maybe get a couple of little puckers in that seam around the top. But because it's on the inside and these are not designed to be reversible, I don't mind too much. So after I made that first hat, I went on to make 7 total. I ended up with 2 small, 2 medium, 2 large. Now the large are my size. So I've got this one left. That's the large, and that's my size. My head's about 23 inches in circumference. And I even thought, which I'm really pleased I did, to put in friction pen a tiny little letter for SML, so that if I got them mixed up or people were trying them on at the market, I'd know what size was what. So I sold 3 hats at the market on Sunday. Oh, I was so chuffed about it. 2 large and 1 medium, because one lady had a slightly smaller head. And so this is obviously an adult size, my size. The second size down, I have 1 of them left, is this one. And it's good for maybe teens and small adults. Depends on your size of your head, really, doesn't it? And then I have 2 of the small ones left, which I did not sell any of, so I only made 2 in the end. And so I still have these left. I like to put a little embellishment on them. I don't want them to be too blingy, too overdone, in case that puts people off. Really like the fabric I used on that one. And then the other one was this fun frog print, which I actually used for my own hat last year when I made the first couple and decided I didn't like making them. But now I do. But out of 7, I sold 3, plus some other things. It was a pretty good day at the market. And so I've decided to make more. With it being the height of summer and people needing a bit of shade on their heads, I think I can easily sell a few more of those. So what I did, I think the evening, Sunday evening, after I came home from the market, had dinner and all that, I went through all my denim and I pulled out the really, really stretchy stuff, which I don't want to use for hats, and I stuck it in its own box. I then pulled out a bunch of pairs of legs that I have that are not too stretchy. And these things take up quite a lot of fabric. I can go through a whole pair of jeans, if you don't count the body part, because most of the jeans I have are just pairs of legs. I can use the majority of 2 pairs of legs for a bigger hat. And if it's a particularly wide pair of jeans and maybe one of the small sizes, I can probably use 1 leg. But it still goes through a lot of fabric because the pattern pieces are such an odd shape. And I've been placing the pattern pieces vertically. So the grain line, where is it? Where is it? This is a brim piece and you need 2 of these. So there's the grain line. So normally you would put that with the straight grain of your fabric, say cotton or whatever. Probably that way, actually, with your selvage over here and your fold over here. But with the jeans, obviously to make the most of the fabric, I've been putting them this way. And that works really well because if there's a little bit of stretch in the jeans, it's going this way, but not this way. Usually jeans don't stretch vertically. And so I've been putting the pieces like this. And then this is the upright part between the circular crown and the brim. And you need 2 of those. So I did the same with that. And then for the crown, I just fit it wherever I can. On some of them, I put it across a seam, which I thought looked really nice. That one has a seam on it. I did get a little bit of footage. After I'd set up my table on Sunday, I got a little bit of footage because I thought, you won't see all the hats if I haven't filmed them before I sell them. And as it turned out, I did. So I was, as I say, really pleased. So my plan is to get some more sewing done this week. It didn't happen yesterday. Monday was filled with going to Costco in the morning, spending too much money. And in the afternoon, I had 5 emails from my new employers. And I was expecting this because they did say there was going to be some online training and then followed up by a whole day of in-person training. And so when I opened those emails at lunchtime, I realized I had to do my 3-hour online training. So I just got it all done. It took all afternoon. And it was all about being a caregiver, being careful of your own safety, being careful of your client's safety, dealing with people with dementia, that sort of thing. So I feel like I learned a lot. A lot of it's common sense. And I think I said to one of my kids later, a lot of it is a bit like just being a mum with a toddler, because I think that dealing with children, young children, and dealing with people with dementia have a lot of similarities. So I have to say, I wasn't very patient with my own kids, but I'm hoping I can be a lot more patient with my clients. Yeah, I will be a lot more patient with my clients. I'm a lot older now. I've learned a lot in the intervening years. And hopefully I have softened up a lot from the stressed out, frazzled mother that I was way back then. So yes, later this week I've got a full day training session in person at the offices of the place I'm working. I don't know when my first actual shifts will be, but for now, focus on that. Which is to say, today is Tuesday. I have Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday free, as far as I know, in which to sew for next Sunday's market. And maybe some of Saturday, but I do have a lunch date that day. So the plan is just make a bunch more hats, really. I haven't sold any of those metal straw pouches or cutlery pouches or pot holders that I made. So I'm going to go where the interest seems to be lying and make hats. Of course, I have to confess, it's mid-morning and I still haven't switched on my sewing machine, and there's a really good reason for that. My excuse is that I got a bunch of library books out last week and I started reading one of them, and it's really good. You've probably heard of this author. It's Val McDermid. And she, they, yes, her pronoun is she, it says in the back there. She has written so many books. She's a very prolific writer. She's Scottish, and so her books are set in Scotland, all the ones I've read anyway. So there's a list of some of her books. There's lots of them. But I really love the Karen Pirie novels. This one is Still Life, a Karen Pirie novel. You may have seen one of her books dramatized on Netflix. I think it's just called Pirie. Really enjoyed that. But of course, I'd read the book, so I kind of knew how it ended. But it's always interesting to see how they convert a book to a movie or a TV series. And yeah, I burned my way through probably more than 3/4 of that in a very short space of time. It just, I've forgotten how nice it was to read a real book, because I don't do it much these days. And my husband was reading something recently and he said, one of the best ways of keeping your brain active into old age is to read. And it doesn't matter what you read. It doesn't have to be scientific literature or anything. It can just be novels, but apparently it has to be on paper. So apparently paper books, the good old-fashioned kind, are more stimulating to your brain, I guess, than audiobooks or ebooks, which I'm really happy about, because this is still my favorite way to read a book. And last night, I got ready for bed. I brushed my teeth and put my retainers in and, did everything I needed to do. And at 10 o'clock, I sat down on the couch deciding I was going to spend a good bit of quality time with this book. And I didn't go to bed till midnight. And it's so hard to put a book down when you're really into it and you just want to push through and finish it. But then you're like, oh, okay, I'll regret it in the morning. If I stay up till 3 a.m. reading, it won't be good. It won't look good on the face in the morning. As it is, my face is suffering. I finally figured out that the rosacea is worst in the summer. I think it's the heat. It just makes you flush more, and then you get more pimples and all that sort of thing. And luckily I have the Metro Gel, which I can put on when it looks pretty bad. And it's not bad right now, but I can see it close up. Hopefully I don't look too pimply in the camera. But yeah, I'm digressing again, aren't I? So this morning, of course, I got up. Yeah, I still switched on my phone, but I spent a lot less time on my phone this morning. And I spent some time reading. And then, of course, read a bit more while I was eating my breakfast. And kept looking at the time and thinking, I was going to sew today. My plan was to make this a sewing day, and I'm still reading. So I forced myself away from it. The self-discipline, Nicola. It's impressive, no? So, yeah. I need to put that aside and get on with things. Before we go on to the sewing, I thought I'd show you how I make these bucket hats. It's not a tutorial, but I thought I might bring you along with me as I sew some more hats and can show you where the pitfalls are, or maybe some tips I've learned for getting a good result. But first I'll just show you these. There has not been any knitting this week, and there's only been a minimal amount of crochet because I have had other things on my mind. But I did get a bunch of these granny squares made. I always take something to the market so that in between customers I can keep my hands busy. Actually, in between customers, I also ran off to the splash park and cooled off because it was hot. And whilst my tent was not as unbearable as I expected, I did still wander over to the playground area where the water park is, and I splashed my arms and legs and round the back of my neck a bit, about 4 times over the course of the morning, because I thought, I don't want to die of heat exhaustion. I don't think there was any danger of that. But anyway, it was pretty warm. And I think that it's not going to be as bad as I expected on future Sundays. If it gets that hot again next Sunday, I'm not worrying about it now, because I know I can handle it. But this all-in-one granny square in the frigid colorway. Frigid. You just love that name. What did I do with my label? Oh, there it is. Dropping things on the floor again. So this is, soft white frigid. So in other words, it's got the soft white as the outer edge. With these granny square, it's red heart granny square. Hang on, let me get this right. It's red heart all-in-one granny square. And there are some colorways that have a black edge. Some have soft white and some have Aran, which is creamier. Although, having said that, that one I made last week, which is the hot stuff with the shades of red, the edge definitely looks more pink than the soft white. I think they let that one sit too long in the dye bath or something. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8 squares made out of that. So that means there should be 7 more squares left in here. And I still don't know what I'm going to make with them, but it's quite interesting getting them done. It's weird how it works out though. Some squares I seem to be doing are mostly in the 5.5 mil hook. Other squares I seem to be doing mostly in the 6, and others are a mixture of the 2. So I just have to have both hooks there. And sometimes I don't change a hook. I'll just deliberately loosen up or tighten up my tension just so that the color change lands in the right spot. I'm not being too anal about it, admittedly. One doesn't look too bad. There's some where it could look better. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to be too bad. So on the whole, I'm pretty happy with this yarn. It is a little bit of a rough acrylic. Not, if you've ever used Red Heart Super Saver, you'll know what I mean. It's not the softest acrylic, but as we all know, it's very sturdy, and anything you make with it will last for a very long time. And it's a good price. If you're on a budget, you could do worse. Okay, so I better not put that back on my cutting table because I need to cut denim. All right, I'm going to stop yakking now and actually get on with some sewing. Fortified with my Dragonwell green tea. See you in a bit. I've done my cutting out. Sometimes the cutting seems to take longer than the sewing. Not so much with these bucket hats because they do take a while. what I've decided to use for this small hat is my denim leg that was dyed with coral grit dye. And the right side was a bit blotchy in places. I think one of the reasons I dyed this particular pair of jeans was that there was a bit of staining on it. So what I've decided to do is use the back side of the fabric, which just looks orangey and bluey all at the same time, but no nasty sort of stain looking to it. And anything on the other side will be hidden by the lining. And the best fabric I found to coordinate was my robin fabric. I still have a little bit of that left. I know I've used that in quite a few products, but I really like it, and I feel like it's inoffensive and neutral in a way, but it also has some orange in it, which will go with the orange of the jeans. I've already ironed my label to the middle of the crown on the lining side. Now, I did debate with myself whether to do that this time and whether to start putting the labels onto the upright part here. But I think I'm just going to leave it where it is. I'm just going to keep on doing it like this. I feel like with the denim hat, you're not really going to turn it the other way around to see the lining on the outside, because the denim would be maybe less comfortable next to your head. But if that limits it, then so be it. I like it this way. The needles I'm using are these Schmetz jeans needles, 9014. There's a couple of little X's there. Those are the ones I've used before and are probably a bit blunt now, but I thought I would hang on to them in case I ever wanted to do any non-fabric crafts where I needed to punch holes in whatever, or if it didn't matter, if it was a blunt needle, I didn't want to throw them away. So I'm on the third of 5, and I've got a couple of nice new ones for when this needle starts to get a little blunt. I've also kept a little bit of the seam, and if you look on the back, again, I like the back better than the front. So I'll probably cut myself, I can do that now, I will cut myself a little section of this really close to the stitching or the bulk of the seam. And I'll probably add that to the hat when it's finished. There we go. I'll probably just embellish it with this piece of seam at the end. So the first thing I need to do is sew my label. On that first hat I made, I can't believe I did that, but I completely forgot to sew around the label. Oh, Nicola, get your mouth in gear. You see, I woke up early this morning after a late night, and that never goes well, does it? I'm getting croaky. I need more water. One of the downsides to the jeans needle is it's fantastic when I'm sewing through the actual denim, but it does seem a little heavy when I'm sewing through the cotton. But I'm not going to be switching it out every 2 seconds. That would just make it all take too long. I'm still referring to my handwritten notes on the process so I don't mess it up. Even though I've made 7 of these in the last week, I don't want to mess it up. So now we have to join our brim ends together to make a whole brim. Because there's a lot of curve in these pattern pieces, you have to be pretty careful not to stretch them out. I've only had an issue in 1 out of 7 of the hats where I had to really finagle one of the seams. Because you're working in 3 dimensions, it can be so easy to find that something doesn't go together quite right. But on the whole, it's worked out quite nicely. I've been trying to match my thread as much as possible to the fabric I'm using, and I had a little bit of an aha moment. At one point, I thought I don't have to use the same colour in the top and the bottom. So now what I've done in a couple of the hats is I've used 2 different shades of thread. So in this one, I'm using a kind of a light peach, I guess you'd call it. It's a Gutermann thread. I love Gutermann thread. Don't know if you can see it. It's quite subtle against that orangey colour. And then in the bottom, I'm just using white to go with this. I'm just going to press my seam allowances open. And there's my outer brim and my inner brim. In the pattern, I think she says you can top stitch either side of the seams if you want. It holds the seam allowances down. And I suppose it looks nice, but I didn't bother. In fact, I forgot with the first hat. Let's be honest here. I just forgot because I had made some bare bones notes on how to construct it while not watching the video. I didn't watch the video. While looking at the photo tutorial, and I did not include the note about top stitching in my notes. So it just got completely skimmed over. And you know what? I think they look fine without it. It's really important to add your little notch marks on these because each pattern piece has some notches which you can just either cut out as a little V or you can just snip in. I've been snipping in just carefully because you don't want to snip in more than your seam allowance because you don't want to make a weak spot or a hole. So what I've been doing is being really careful that I don't forget those marks. You can see there, it looks a bit stained there. That's why I dyed this, but it's going to be on the inside. It will be fine. So this stage is where you put the outer edges of the brim together and then sew around that. The brim is probably the most time-consuming step because what I'm going to be doing is sewing about 6 lines of stitching around the brim to reinforce it. It gives it some more structure when you do that, and it looks nice. But it takes a bit of time. When you sew, you need to make sure you're not messing about with your seam allowances. They should be pressed out flat and beautiful. So once I've sewn around my outer brim, I pink the seam allowances so that there's less bulk. What will be interesting once I have finished filming this is to see how long it took me. One lady at the market did ask how long it took me to make these things. And I said to her, I'm pretty sure the first few I made were about 3 hours. It certainly seemed to be about 3 hours, although I wasn't officially timing myself. Seems an awful long time. Which is why I ended up putting a $30 price tag on these, because I spent a lot of time on them. But I'm pretty sure that the last one I made, I think that was probably on Friday or Saturday, maybe Saturday, it was half that. quite often, though, choosing which denim I'm going to use for it and then cutting it out is a big part of that time. I'm going to go press that now. What I do when I'm pressing it from the lining side, and I'm trying to make sure that the lining is just rolling slightly to the inside so you can see a teeny bit of the denim from the back and none of the lining from the front. And then I like to pin around, because when you're doing all these lines of stitching, it can shift. You do not want to end up with any puckers on the back. Puckers are your enemy. And the potential for puckers in this project are many. No, that doesn't make sense. Many potential. The potential for puckers in this project is high. Does that make sense? It'll have to do, because I'm not coming up with another option. This is quite a thick denim. Either it's looking a little bit bunchy there. So when you're working around doing all the lines of stitching around the brim, it's important to make sure you're smoothing it out and keeping it flat as you go around. So I usually start with the pins in, and then when my needle gets a bit close to the pins, I take them out and then finish off the rest without. And normally I'll start my top stitching. See, I didn't press that quite right. I'll start my top stitching up near one of the seams, but I try not to have the stitching starting in the exact same spot each time. So I'm going to lengthen my stitch length from 2.6 to 3.5. And then we're just going to whiz around. I also try and remember to hold my top thread when I'm starting to sew, otherwise it can get a bit tangled on the back, and people are going to see the other side of this. Whilst I like to have my thread fairly well coordinated to my denim, you have to be a little bit careful not to have it matching so well that when you come around and you want to join to your starting point, you can't see it. Oh, the amount of times I have been squinting at the work to try and figure out where the end of the line is. So that's why I'm not snipping my thread off until the end, because at least there I know where the end is. That's the brim done. It seems that regardless of size, about 6 lines of stitching 1 centimetre apart or 3/8 of an inch seems to do the trick. There is a little bit of pulling on the cotton, which sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. I'll press it and hopefully that will get rid of some of that, but it's on the inside, so I'm not concerned about it. Next stage, we just check my list, is to sew the middle pieces together. which is the upright part of the hat. Remember to change my stitch length back to 2.6. My middles are sewn, and what you'll notice is that there's a smaller edge, which is obviously the top, and a wider edge, which is the bottom. So the next thing we're going to do is sew the main circle to the main body, right sides together. I find the easiest way is to turn this middle part inside out and then grab this, and then you've got 4 little snips or notches on your circle which match up to 2 seams and 2 snips or notches on your middle. Now this is the bit where historically I've always decided that I loathe making bucket hats. But I have softened my stance towards these now. It's important to clip or pin a lot because you're having to ease a 3D piece, whoops, onto a flat piece. There's going to be a little bit of faffing involved. Beauty of fabric is that there is a little bit of stretch involved because you're not working with a straight grain. So it should be possible to ease it in. And if you really hate how it's looking, you can always unpick it and try again. Sorry, my right arm is leaning on my machine, and it's probably clicking away in the background. I shouldn't be doing that, should I? Oops, now my hand's hitting it. Oh dear. There. All clipped on. And now I'm going to do the same with the other one. Although I've used most of my clips now. I usually do them one at a time. Let's get the other one ready while we're at it. So we need the right side of our crown lining to the right side of our crown middle, making sure it's the right way up. I have found that if you put the flat circle onto the bed of the machine and sew from the other side, I mostly have a good result. I'm not claiming to have a 100% success rate here. And also the one downside to these clips is my walking foot doesn't like it when it catches at the back. So I have to take a couple of clips out to start sewing. So with short bursts of stitching and a lot of manipulation and sometimes a little tugging to stretch one layer more than the other, you get there in the end. That looks okay. I don't trim the seam allowances on the rest of the hat, just on the brim. That I already did. And it seems okay. It all seems to nest inside itself perfectly by the end. And I think trying to top stitch that or maybe, I don't know, trim the seam allowances probably would just be unnecessary or end up giving you something to rip out. So that's the outer crown done. Now the lining crown doesn't always work out quite as well. By accepting the lack of perfection on this, I've made my job a lot simpler. I did just press this using a tailor's hand because it's something rounded you can put up inside just to press the seam. And yes, there's a couple of puckers. But because I've decided that this is not a reversible hat, the pressure is off to have it looking as nice as the outside. Things are coming along well now. So the next stage is to join the brim to the lining crown. So just need them right sides together and flip them around. This part is usually fairly straightforward. I shouldn't speak too soon, should I? Just a case of matching up the seam allowances. Now the funny thing is, I think I said in my last vlog that I had a little bit too much bulk because all the seam allowances were landing in the same spot. And I considered staggering the seams, but when I thought more about it, I thought, well, these pieces aren't exactly the same all around. They're not, when you've joined them together, completely symmetrical. So at the side seams, you get a slightly different shape than at the middle of the pattern pieces. So I ended up deciding, no, I was just going to suck it up and leave all the seam allowances together. Having said that, on one of my pieces, or hats I should say, I did accidentally put the crown piece in wrong. I had the crown piece in as if I had given it a quarter turn, and my seams were matching up with these notches instead of these seams on the brim. And I thought, oh man, should I unpick it and redo it? I had done it just before putting my sewing machine away for the night. Not putting it away, switching it off. It never goes away. And I came back to it the next day and I thought, do I unpick and correct that and then attach the outer crown, or do I just risk it? And I risked it. I thought, I hate unpicking. Unpicking is miserable, isn't it? It's always so fiddly. Undoing something you already think is done. Ugh. So I left it, and I was worried that the lining of the crown would not sit neatly inside the hat. And you know what? It was okay. I didn't think it was a problem. And I'm sure no one's ever going to notice that I did it wrong. So we're going to sew this in now. Now I've got the brim on the outside and the crown on the inside, and I usually sew from the brim side. I usually take this part off just to give myself a bit more room to move. And then I sew from the brim side. Just have to be careful that it's all lying down and away from the seam so that you don't go sewing the wrong bit of fabric in. First brim seam done. And with this crown part, the outer crown, you fold down ahead of time a couple of inches. I usually do it between a notch and the side seam, so I'm not interfering with the places I have to match up my notches and seams. So I pressed that down, and that just gives you a guide of finishing off later. You'll see why. So the best way I found to do this job, this is the part which I found initially really, really hard to understand on the original pattern. I looked at the photo tutorial and could not figure out what she was doing. So I worked it out, and just using a bit of my own logic, I just had to think about it. I thought, okay, where do I want this thing? Here's my lining piece. Here's my outer piece. I need this piece attached to this side of this. Anyway, the best way I found of doing it is to turn this inside out, tuck that brim right down inside, and then turn this one, well, have this one right side out, which I already do, and put that down inside as well. That way you've got your brim matching up with your right side of your crown and the linings on the outside. And let me just make sure my seams are lined up. So here's my seam on my lining. Here's my seam on my crown, my outer crown. And then you just have to make sure it matches up as well as you can. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, guys. This is just a bucket hat. If you can get your seams to match up, you get a little thrill of excitement, right? There's something about a well-matched seam that, I don't know, it's very satisfying, but don't beat yourself up if it isn't. And then I've got my little snips here, which I need to match up. You don't want perfectionism to paralyze you, do you? That was good alliteration, wasn't it? Perfection to paralyze you. I think I mentioned in my last vlog that the fabric store in my town is closing. So I've already been in once to see what the deals were, but the deals were mostly on patterns. A couple other things, but mostly patterns were on a good deal. And they sent out another email this week, and I'm like, well, it's still not good enough for me to go back in yet. The quilt cottons and the trims and all that sort of thing are not really on a better discount than they would be in a good sale. I'm waiting for, 75% off. We'll get there, hey? We'll get there. Now this part where I have to leave a turning gap, this is a tricky part. There's a couple of little tricky parts in this hat, isn't there? I want to leave enough of a gap that it's not ripping the stitches when I turn it through. I did leave it a bit small one time. But I don't want the gap to be so big that I'm struggling to have it sew down nice and flat from the right side later on. I like to put a pin in there to hold the layers together, but because I'm using clips to hold everything together, the pin just reminds me not to sew that bit. As you'll see, I'm sewing from the lining side, which means that I can see where my previous seam is. Feel a bit of a bump there. Got to be careful of that brim. It's bulky and it wants to get in the way. So the beauty of working from this side is, yeah, I can see that seam that I did just before, and I can sew directly over it for this seam. There we are. That is all sewn around, and I have left a gap. What I like to do at this stage is I have it this way up, and then I'm pressing it from the inside here, just pushing the lining away from the brim. I also pin this turning gap down where I did that little 2-inch ironed down hem. I pin that down first, and then I iron it, and then I turn it inside out. And then I press, ouch, stabbed myself. Oh, blood, lovely. Blood alert. I don't think I have anything to wrap around my finger, so I'll just have to hope I don't get any blood on this thing. So, fun times. Reality TV, folks. So, yes, I always turn it then this side out, and then I'm ironing it, pushing this away from the brim as I iron. And then I turn it right side out again, and then extend my stitch length back to the 3.5. And then I make sure I'm not bleeding on the product. No, looks okay. It was just a pinprick. They don't bleed for long. And I'm going to start on this seam here, I think. So what I'm doing is I'm top stitching fairly close to the, not the fold, it's really the seam. So it's on the crown part, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. And it just holds down everything nicely and also closes up that gap at the same time. So we're going to go all the way around. I think if you're feeling a little nervous about making one of these for the first time, definitely pick a color of thread that's fairly close to your fabric color, so that if there are any little oopsies, it won't show up too much. But I think what would be fun is to have a hat maybe with brightly colored thread and actually make a feature of it. If you felt confident enough to do that, I think that would be cool. It's finished, guys. I think it looks really cute. I was going to use this orange one for a hat for myself, but I decided to use it for a child's one. Really happy with that. Let's see how long that took me. Not counting the selecting the fabric and cutting it out, that took me an hour. An hour of actual construction time. So I've definitely speeded up a lot since the first few, which is awesome. Still going to leave them at $30 though, because obviously I have people who are willing to pay that for a hat. I put a question on the denim recycling group asking what people thought would be a reasonable price for them. Some people were saying $40 to $60, and I thought there's no way anyone's going to pay that for this. Maybe if I had put a whole bunch of other work into it, I don't know, made it way more embellished, perhaps. I don't know. I think a lot of the time people are just wanting some shade from the sun, and they don't want anything that's going to be too out of this world, too wacky. So I just realized I didn't put my little embellishment strip on, and what I like to do is put it over a side seam. I wondered whether someone might be interested in maybe putting a little feather through their hat or some sort of thing sticking out of the loop. So what I do is I just check around and I think, okay, is there a messy part? Is there a bit that I'd like to cover up? Is there a spot where the stitching could look better? It's looking okay. This is where I started and finished though, so I think I'm just going to pop that over there, and I'm not going to worry about leaving the ends raw. What I've done with some of them is I have pinked the ends. Oh, that's thick. So pink the ends like that, and then just pop a few stitches in either end of it to hold it on. But the nice thing about these things is they're a blank canvas. If you wanted to do more embellishment on them, you totally could. There. I think it just adds a little extra interest. So that's a small hat made. So that means I now have 3 of those. I think before Sunday, I'd like to have 2 more mediums and as many large ones as I have the time to make. It's the end of the afternoon. I need to go up and get some dinner sorted. So I'll just do a little review of what I managed to get done today so far. This is the one you saw me make. I really love this dyed denim. I think I'm going to have to do more dyeing of denim at some point. So that one is a small. Oh, I think I forgot to put the size on that last one I made. Grab my pen. This is the next one I made today. It's just a very light pair of jeans type pants. They are, or were, absolutely huge. I only needed one leg to make this one, and so I've got enough fabric in the other leg to make an adult one like this. This is a very neutral one, just a grey lining. This grey quilt cotton, very thin. Out of all the cottons I've used to line, the ones that have gone a little bit less smooth on this side have been these thin linen look ones. But what was nice about having the entire pair of pants on this is I was able to use the front waistband button on it. So I really like that style. So that was a medium, and then this one, no, I didn't do this one yet. I'm using my friction pen just to put an SML on there, because what's nice about that is it can be ironed off afterwards if anyone doesn't like looking at my little pink letter on there. Not that I'm sure they'll care. This is the one I just finished, the third one I made. It's an interestingly textured pair of jeans. I used pink lining, so I used pink thread on there, not bright pink, just a light pink, and I think it looks really pretty. I thought, seeing as I'm using pink fabric, I might as well go the whole hog and just do lots of pink. That's what the inside looks like with the writing, the French writing on it. And that's a medium. So now I have 3 small, 3 medium. I'm happy with that. You notice I didn't show you the grey one turned inside out. There was a lot of puckers in that one. Yeah. That fabric, wouldn't be buying that one again. Too thin. The thinner the fabric, the more it seems to pucker. Which is, I don't know, it just seems you'd expect it to be the other way around. But no. So I have 3 new bucket hats made for now. I don't know if I'll be coming back down here this evening. what I will probably do is, after dinner, get some editing done of this video that I took today, and I still have to have a walk. It was rather funny last night because it's been so hot during the day. We've been going out for a walk. As soon as the sun goes behind the mountain around 8 o'clock, it's time to go out for a walk because it's still warm. It's still really warm, but not blazingly hot. And just as we're coming up our driveway to go for a walk, the man in the house across the road, he's coming down his driveway to go for a walk as well. And I just laughed. I said, we're all emerging now the sun's gone away. It's Wednesday. I'm all dressed and breakfasted and ready to start sewing again. So I'm just going to finish off this video here and get it uploaded. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you if you watched all the way through. Just a little reminder that if you like my vlogs, please like, comment, subscribe. Also, I have a Ko-fi page. The link's always underneath in the description box if you feel like buying me a coffee. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.